Hello, everyone, and welcome to this discussion at the Future Work Forum Partners Insights. I've got a colleague who I'm going to be speaking to in a very short time, Ben Emmens from the Conscious Project, and then a little later, Samreen McGregor. And the topic for today's discussion is, I hope you enjoyed the title, it's Aware Don't Care. And it's really asking the question, when we wish to address toxic behaviors, is there possibly a role for something called motivational interviewing to be a pathway to behavior change? So to investigate that a little bit, I'd like to take you through a couple of slides just to situate everybody in terms of what motivational interviewing is all about. So let's just go to the next slide. So last year, I brought out a book called Toxic Humans, which is an investigation of toxicity in organizations, but also looking at toxic behaviors of people in organizations. And having published the book and talked to many friends and colleagues about it, I'm beginning to think about how we can address some of the issues that were thrown up by the book in terms of how can we help people who have, for whatever reason, toxic behavioral issues. So a starting point, I think, is certainly in leadership development more broadly is self-awareness. And Tasha Eurich makes a very good point about three different types of people when it comes to being open and receptive to behavior change. They're those people whose self-awareness is such that they're what she calls the lost causes. And you can see there people who really have no self-knowledge and no motivation to acquire it. Then you have, and this is the title of the session, of course, Aware Don't Care. So these are people who have absolutely every intention of continuing with their behavior because they know the kind of impact that they have and they see no real reason to change. Their success, as they see it, has been predicated on the way they behave, but they haven't really been paying attention to the kind of impact that they have on people. And then the third group is the nudgeables. And these are people who genuinely want to change, but they don't know how. And this is where, for example, coaching, mentoring, various forms of support can come in to be really, really helpful. And what Dr. Urich suggests is that it's a question of combining feedback with compassion. And this is something that can be very successful with this particular person. I guess the key thing, the key message I wanted to mention straight off is that when we are looking to help someone who has behavioral issues, we might call them toxic behavioral issues, our first port of call should be that we persist with an empathetic and compassionate approach. And because I think this is a strongly held sort of view of mine, it led me to sort of think, is there perhaps an approach that could be very helpful in this context? And one of those things I thought could be part of our toolbox is motivational interviewing. And just super quick, and we can send you and give you access to all of the information here in more detail. There are these 6 principles of motivational interviewing. You see them here: express empathy, develop discrepancy. This is about inviting someone to think about what the possible differences might be between what they're currently doing, what life might look like later. Avoiding arguing, for example, sounds very obvious, but again, a very important part of motivational interviewing, and rolling with resistance too, because people are struggling to change, and it's very important to keep going with that. To support self-efficacy, this is the thinking that really the answer, if there is one, or the impetus to change lies within the person. It's a question of trying to bring that out. And then assessing confidence. This is about really stating to the person, where do you think you stand on this particular issue? How confident are you that you might be able to change? and inviting them to score that on a scale of 1 to 10, for example, can be very helpful, because it can then give you the opportunity to say, well, you think you're around a 4 or a 5 at the moment. What would it take to shift that to perhaps be a 7? So motivational interviewing has a deep and rich history. It started very much looking at helping people through addictions. So clinicians in many parts of the world will go through a motivational interviewing program or course or be aware of it. And so my very simple thought was, could this be something that we, as practitioners, coach practitioners, working with organizations, could it be something useful that we think about? Maybe it's something that we're already doing. Is it something that we could dial up? And so to help debate some of these, I think, absolutely fascinating points, I'm delighted that Ben is here with me today. I'm just going to momentarily leave those questions up here. It's really an invitation to Ben to share some of his initial thoughts. Do we think that MI, motivational interviewing, could help people? Um, is it perhaps a pathway? And who could be helped? Is it just the nudgeables, or could we actually reach the aware don't care? And maybe some final reflections over the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can enjoy a conversation together. So Ben, I think great to
Thank
have you
you.
here. And what do you think? Is it something that in your practice at the Conscious Project, you've been almost naturally doing this with the many groups and individuals and organizations that you work with around the world? How does it feel to you?
Yeah, well, Micah, thanks very much. And it is a great framework, and it's particularly relevant for individuals and organizations that are doing values-based work. That is to say, their own approach to the work that they do, whether it's strengthening, shaping organizational culture, whether it's working with a group or a team, whether it's working with an individual, that the work, that the practice comes from a clear, principled values base. And I think so. That's one thing. That's
Mm,
immediate
yes,
reaction for me to it, and it's particularly relevant to me in the work that we do at the Conscious Project because we care about social impact. And so we are always looking beyond the immediate return on investment to shareholders. We're looking at
mm,
impact in society for communities, so particularly the work we do with humanitarian and development organizations. And we are looking at how we strengthen civil society
right.
for the better, for it to be more inclusive in
Yes,
genuine sense of inclusion. That is to say that those in the margins with less power or opportunity, for whatever
yes.
reason, health, class, social status, age, gender, and so on, that they have opportunities to participate and thrive. And so for us, motivational interviewing is a really important component of what we do. And what we
Mm,
tend to do at the Conscious Project is take the bits that work according to the different
right.
contexts that we're in. And so
Yes.
I particularly appreciate the principles here. And I mean, spoiler alert to those watching and listening, the short answer is yes. I truly
Very good.
believe it is a pathway, right,
Yes.
for that
Yes.
second category. The aware don't care. Uh, it's clearly a tool and a resource for the
Mm,
notables. And what a great
mm,
title, by the way. But
hmm
those individuals who are grasping, who are searching, who are doing the work,
mm,
there's many different things that can support them, and
mm,
motivational interviewing is clearly one. For the lost causes, I would say it's a brave coach or a brave mediator that would limit themselves to that tool, to that instrument. But for the aware don't care,
mm,
I, it's who are in and of themselves a fascinating cohort. I mean, stressful and frustrating
mm,
as well.
mm.
Often
Yes,
individuals who, in the words of Marshall Goldsmith, have gotten to a place, but what has got them to where they are is not what is going to get them to where they want to go.
exactly.
And sooner
Mm,
or later, aware don't care individuals run out of road. Some manage to
mm,
keep going for a very long time, those behaviors that are toxic.
mm,
And maybe they change jobs, or maybe they're let off the hook because they
mm,
are spectacularly uh, fruitful, or I don't
mm,
know, high performing by another metric. Let's say they generate a lot of
mm,
revenue for their organization, a giant income stream, but that's the way they treat their people is tolerated because they do something else that is highly prized. So,
exactly.
so some individuals obviously can make it work for a long time. Their toxicity is somehow an allowable weakness, or an acceptable shadow somehow. But yeah, for those who've been told that they need to change, because that's a category as well, isn't it?
Mm, mm,
The aware don't care. It takes quite a lot of work to win them over, but quite
mm,
often in our coaching practice, I think both of us, we're working with
mm,
individuals that have been told in no uncertain terms, perhaps after an
mm.
investigation or a complaints procedure, that they need to change some things, and they are reluctant. They
Yes.
can't see the reason really. They want to justify what they've done. I think
Mm,
that's where the approach and the principles particularly are
mm.
really, really pertinent. So that's an initial
Yes.
reaction, Michael. What do you
Thank you.
what do you think? What
Thank you,
does
Ben.
that prompt for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really makes a very strong connect with the essence of compassion, in the sense of um, guarding against that human tendency to be quite judgmental of people, to be able to suspend that judgment and to um, work with the person to offer up, the potential for an alternative way forward, I think is really very, very important. And Ben, you probably know that my view is that empathy is a great thing, but it too is a pathway, if you like, to compassion, because compassion, to me, is all about action. And one of the things I think uh, about motivational interviewing is that perhaps, depending on the situation, depending on the person that you're working with, let's say as a coach, um,
Mm,
it may require, um, uh, if you like, a dialing up of that ability to roll with the punches. If the person gets quite defensive, and says, I really don't know what you're talking about,
mhm.
I don't see it that way, to be able to sort of stay with it, but to be able to manage that, sometimes that quite unnerving element of confrontation, of denial, if you like,
Yeah,
um, is something that I think increases our own self-awareness as coaches, perhaps.
yeah.
What do you think?
Motivational interviewing is not for the faint-hearted, and it is not for individuals who have somehow parked their own work on self-awareness and self-regulation. It really
Mm,
is an approach that works for those individuals who are committed on an ongoing basis to becoming more self-aware, to figuring out
yeah,
how to self-regulate. Because I was just checking back, and the principles, I think 3 and 4, avoiding argument and rolling with resistance, or rolling with the punches. One of the biggest challenges I found in this approach is the fine line between
yeah,
challenge and collusion. So the
yes,
sense of avoiding argument or avoiding challenge could convey or imply affirmation or endorsement of an approach, or
mm,
even worse, collusion, that they somehow are victim. And I think, and they need sympathy, uh,
yes.
less empathy, more sympathy, because they've been wronged, they've been caught out. They're the ones who've been caught out.
Mm.
or exposed and having to do this very inconvenient work on themselves. And it's slowing them down from the real business of delivering results. And being able to withstand that and challenge that constructively
Mm,
so that an individual, in a way, it broadens and opens their perspective to
mm,
the fact that their behaviors are the toxic behaviors are limiting behaviors, and that
yes.
ultimately they will only achieve part of the success that they're capable
Mm,
of. And I think that's so that loop back to empathy to reiterate and refine what it is, the discrepancy and so on,
yes. Yes.
remind the individual that they can choose a different path through this, that uh, they can achieve even better outcomes if they were prepared perhaps to engage a little bit more with their own I suppose in a way it's vulnerability and
Yeah.
infallibility, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're actually
Absolutely.
work of motivational interviewing is tiptoeing a little
Yes.
around pride and ego and the power
Yes.
dynamic. And I think I guess I would reiterate that here that I speak from my perspective as
Mm,
a British male of a certain age and working with a certain demographic a lot of the time as well. I
mm,
do work with my peers and that's where the empathy piece and just I work with many different individuals too, but I don't know how, and it will be great. Samreen's perspective will be
mm.
fantastic. I wonder how it differs.
Yes.
If you're a female coach, if you're a person of color, if you
Mm,
are, what if you're a coach in your 20s or 30s? And
exactly.
can you develop sufficient empathy based on the stories that you tell and the work that you do at the beginning? And in that sense, interestingly, Mike, when you first approached about this, I think motivational interviewing fits into my what I informally refer to as coaching plus technique.
Right.
So there's a
Yes.
lot, as you know,
I think
there's a
that's
there's
mm,
a lot of thinking about, and rightly so, from our I
mm,
suppose umbrella bodies, governing bodies
mm,
of ethics around coaching, that coaching is quite clearly defined,
yes.
delineated. And when
Yes.
we step into this space, I think,
Yes.
where we're having to draw some of our own examples, perhaps demonstrate
Mm,
what it means to have learned a hard thing or to have made
mm,
mistakes, then
mm,
we're in the coaching plus category, as I informally
yes.
refer to it, where
Mm,
there's an element of therapeutic, there's an element of personal
mm,
consultancy and in deep challenge, there's some listening. You've got to take the venting as well as then come back constructively with good, solid coaching techniques. So again, something else.
absolutely.
What do you make of that?
I love that, Ben. Yes, I really like the idea of thinking about it as coaching plus because one of the things that occurs to me is that when we coach people, sometimes, in a corporate or organizational setting, sometimes we have constraints around the amount of time we have with the person. And it
Mm,
seems to me that if we're going to go down the route of motivational interviewing, we need to also be, I guess, aware of the amount of time that is available to us. And it may be something we know behavioral change, takes a long time in some cases to actually unfold and develop. So yeah, I think your description of coaching plus is a very nice one. I see motivational interviewing as a subset of a broader thing,
mm,
which is called coaching, I think, and it's something that we can draw on as and when we feel that the situation and the individual perhaps demands that particular kind of approach. And also, as
yeah,
you said, it'd be interesting to see what Samreen has to say as well. Um,
really, absolutely. So it's definitely a tool to be deployed, is to be
mm,
deployed with care and humility and self-awareness, lest it reinforces or contributes to a shift in the power dynamic, a gap where somehow, as the interviewer, you're perceived as expert or someone where solutions can flow from or challenge. So there's some important work to be done in using it as a technique within the coaching context particularly, but it's very exciting to find additional frameworks as well that we can draw on when we're working with
Yes.
individuals who are perhaps are much slower to arrive at the nudgeable. In a sense, the fact
Mm,
that you're having a conversation implies a degree of nudgeability.
it does.
I
Mm,
think so. Setting it up, the staging, as our partner friend Patrick would say, that how we set up the context for the motivational interview is really important.
that's a really good point.
How we
Really
are,
good point.
it's not just about exploring for exploring's sake. It has to be incredibly outcome focused, I think. And that's the bit, that's
Yes.
the deal. That's
Mm,
the invitation, is to say, well, you might be doing well, but what if I told you you could achieve even more,
yes.
and
And
find
that's
a greater sense of satisfaction, or some of the relationships that I'm sure are challenging for you were perhaps
exactly.
there's a little more ease. Would that be interesting? And it's rare
Mm,
that someone is like, no, I haven't got time for that, or I don't want that. So we are bringing all our communications expertise, and it's a little bit of that sort of marketing communications influence piece as well, because we're trying to
absolutely.
sell, we're selling a promise, or a new set of possibilities for an
That's
individual.
right. A new reality, I guess. Maybe on that note, Ben, we should probably bring things to a close. Uh, it's been lovely to talk to you and great to get your insights. Um, I think I'm still studying motivational interviewing. I think it has a lot of very interesting aspects to it, and is a great complement to the coaching work that I know many of our listeners are involved in and doing great work around the world, as you are. So
Absolutely. No, I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I'm taking away the thought about the how do we set up the interview? How do we get the invitation to step in
mm,
as motivational interviewer? Um,
such a good question.
and the language that we use, and how do we transition that bit, hand over the piece
Yes.
as well, that responsibility for the individual, as the essence of coaching, in
Yeah.
that sense, that it's within the individual's grasp. So a couple of things you give me to take away as well, and I hope for those watching and listening, that it's some good prompts or some good opportunities to reflect on personal practice here. So
Hmm.
thanks, Michael, very much.
Wonderful. Ben, thank you very much indeed. So, looking forward to catching up with you again.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.